Hey everybody, I'm Stacey J.
And I'm Chuck Duran.
Welcome to part 2 with the incredible Jeff Howell.
That's right. Get ready to take some notes. Here we go.
Okay, with so many people recording auditions from home, can you give the voice actors out there listening some sort of tips or ideas of things when it comes to self-direction?
I actually teach a class for self-directing from home, so
Good. So
let me
we're
get
in
my
the right place.
Yeah,
Take
exactly.
my class. Okay, next question.
So I think, without going into great detail and spending
Right.
hours talking
Yes,
about
of
it,
course.
I think the #1 problem that actors face is they overwork their material.
Yes.
Because you're insecure. You're afraid to press send. Could I have done it better? And I think that, #1, don't overwork it because it becomes stale. And I think that actors tend to edit too much of they become engineers all of a sudden and start editing their breaths out too much, and then it sounds unnatural.
Right.
Remember, we want these auditions to sound natural. You know, one thing I've told actors that they need to be careful of is not trying to be so perfect, because then they're thinking about the wrong things. I don't care. When I'm listening back to an audition that someone has done from home and they send it to me, I don't care if I hear a dog bark in the background. It doesn't. If their performance is wonderful, send me that performance. If there's a little noise in the background, this is not for air. It's for me to consider it. I can't imagine a casting director holding that against an actor if something falls in the background and they hear a little click or something. Don't worry about that. Focus on your performance. And so I think that you know, there are all kinds of little tips that I've actually learned a lot just from asking actors about their own experiences and pitfalls from doing this for many years from home. Because there are a lot of people that have been doing it for quite a while. A lot of the promo people got into the home recording, I think more so before the commercial people, because there was a time when agents said, no, you have to come in, you have to come in. You know, now that's changed.
Yeah.
But there was a time when really I think the promo trailer people were the only ones that were really spending money and really taking time, setting up ISDN lines and really developing their business from home. And so, anyway, but now, as I said, that expanded. But I think that I've talked to a bunch of those people that got into it early enough, and I said, what were your blocks? And then how did you get beyond those blocks?
Yeah.
And so they gave me a wonderful list, and so I've been able to compile this information over time. And I think that, again, the key is don't overwork the scripts, don't overthink them too much. I mean, you want to definitely perform them, but sometimes you just have to let it go.
Yeah.
You don't want it to not be fresh.
Yeah.
And then also, I think it's just about, again, as I train with every day in terms of training people and actors privately in my studio and all that, go through your process, develop a process, and really, you know, figure out how to, you know, break down the scripts and follow the specs and really think about the read being unique and authentic. All that stuff that you should be doing, whether it's at home or at a casting company or at the agent's office. You should be going through that all the time, but then have that, and just because you're home doesn't mean you don't do that. Do the same thing in every space.
Yeah.
And you know, so, and I think the last thing is just make your recording space sacred and your practice space away from that. Because I think too many people, I hear actors telling me this all the time, they'll grab the script off the printer, go into their little mic booth area, set it down, and they sit there and they spend hours playing around with it and then record it. Well, that's when it becomes stale. If you go and sit at the kitchen table and drink your coffee and work the script, and then when you're ready, you go in there and you perform it before the microphone in that space, that sacred space, I think you stand a better chance of not overworking your script and not getting into the habit of just playing around at the microphone and treating that as your performance space. I think that's really helped people to get into that habit of doing that.
Yeah, that's genius. I love that.
Is ad-libbing on a, say, a commercial piece or something like that, a little bit here and there, is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I think it is. It's just, you know, control it. I mean, there are a number of actors that they're brilliant, but sometimes they don't know when to stop, and you've got to edit yourself at some point.
Yes.
But I think anything that you can do that can give it some sense of yourself or authenticity, bring something to it, a little bit more of yourself to it, I think that's important.
Yeah.
You don't want to just be a robot.
Yeah.
I mean, because, you know, when I'm listening back to auditions after the 10th or 15th one, you know, if you're just doing the copy as stated and it just sounds so safe, then you might blend in. There's a tendency to blend in with all the other reads, but if you bring a little spark to it, I'm not saying you have to go crazy with it, but don't focus so much on trying to force it.
Let me be unique. Let me try to be funny.
Let it be natural, you know, and if it really fits to do a little button at the end or something like that, then do it.
Exactly.
Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed with people directing themselves at home is that every audition that they read sounds exactly the same. Because there's nobody directing them saying, you know what, how about a little higher, a little younger, a little faster, a little slower. And so they all sound exactly the same. So is there something that you teach people when you teach them about self-directing of saying, listen, before you sit down to actually read your script, these are a few little things that you need to think about. Blank, 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 and blank, and then you're ready to go.
Well, I think that, you know, one thing I tell actors to do is what they should do is get a little sticky or a memo and write down any of their bad habits or things that they need to remind themselves of and put it there by the microphone or in the practice space or both spaces to remind themselves. Because a lot of times when you go behind that microphone, it's almost like muscle memory. You all of a sudden just get right back into those habits. But if you have something to remind you, it's almost like your little director standing there looking at you going, don't do this, don't do that. That's something that can really help you because it's hard to be objective. You know, you're listening to yourself over and over again. It's almost like you look in the mirror at yourself and you don't think you're aging, and then you look at a picture from 10 years ago and you're like, oh, I guess I am aging. You know, it's that sort of thing.
Who's that?
I know, it's me. So when you listen to yourself over and over again, you may not be hearing those subtle changes that a director would be hearing. So you have to somehow get around that, and that is by reminding yourself of what things you need to be doing, whether it's maybe thinking outside the box. You know, I tell actors all the time, maybe what you need to do is do a take that you feel like is your take, and then do one where you go a little crazy with it. Send them both to your agent, let them decide which one to submit. You know, because a lot of times actors don't realize that sometimes when they're going crazy, it's actually to the right level. Some actors, especially with the conversational read, I'm sure that's probably on your list too. The conversational read is deadly because a lot of times people, when they think they're being conversational, they're actually flat.
Exactly. Totally.
And so I tell actors,
well, they might be having conversation
but
with somebody who's
energy.
dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But what they need to do is bring some natural inflection to it. But it needs to have passion in the read, no matter what. Who ever said a conversational read doesn't have passion? You know, but it's got to be natural and it's got to be authentic. You can't force it. You know.
Okay, Jeff. So you teach a lot of workshops and you coaching, and I know that you're teaching voice actors how to do a lot of stuff that is actually helping them to book and to be better voice actors. But I want to ask you this real quick. What are some common, and you must hear these all the times with people sending in auditions, what are some common bad habits that you hear in auditions that people are sending in?
I think that the main problem I hear is I just don't feel people are connecting with the material. And I think it's because of the speed in which we're all working. You know, I think that when actors are either at their agent's office or if they're in casting, a lot of times they're thinking about they've got to go pick up their kids, or they may have, if they're at their agent's office, they may have 3 or 4 scripts they've got to read on, and they're in a hallway waiting to get in the booth, and it's a lobby full of people, and they're thinking about their meters running out. I mean, it's life, you know? So I think all these life distractions have a tendency to have the potential of taking the actors out of the moment. And I think I need actors to be really in that moment. And when they walk in the booth and they grab the copy, I need them to be really focused on the craft. And I'm not saying that they should be so hyper-focused that they're defensive and that they aren't making good choices because they're just so worried about doing the right thing and being perfect. It's not that. I just want them, the minute they grab that copy, I want them to go through their process, like I mentioned before, understand all the basics. So by the time they're in the booth, that they're free, that they already have that foundation built in their minds, and they have a clear idea of the choices that they're going to make while they're in the booth. And then when they go through the material, then it's playtime. It's wonderful when I'm directing them at that point during an audition, because I really feel like this is time to explore. Maybe we can find even a better read that neither the actor or myself had imagined that I could get from that actor. So I think I think that's the biggest thing, is that I think that the focus isn't there, and that I feel like that when I'm listening to the reads, a lot of them just sound automatic. There's not a soul in that read at all.
Do you feel that most reads are a little more on the dull side than they are on the, say, too hyper side?
Yeah, I'd say, well, it just depends on the material. You know, you have to understand, in my world, since we're primarily promo, usually the reads are pretty high energy. Because you have that coming up next on CBS. You have that whole, that sort of read. So they're not usually low energy.
True.
But that being said, sometimes, again, they sound almost too automatic. Now, that being said, in promo, there is a cadence to it that's very similar. So when you hear the promo guys, a lot of them do sound the same. So those reads do tend to have a similarity, whereas commercial, there's quite a bit of variation.
Yeah, it's almost like, it's like a style. You
It's
have
a style.
jazz and you have classical.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's
And
definitely
jazz
a
is
style.
jazz. A lot of different jazz players,
Yeah.
but it's jazz.
Exactly.
Right.
So to get back to your question, I think that, I think that probably the lower energy with commercial, it tends to be sometimes the energy's lower, usually because they're tired, or again, the focus isn't there. And so, I'd say it's probably lower as opposed to higher energy as being a problem.
Okay.
I'm picking up my card.
Uh-oh, you're in trouble, one.
Jeff, I was reading about you. You were described as the best diagnostician in town, a favorite among voiceover pros, and that wherever you are in your development, you will point the person to their next level of performance.
Yes. I agree.
He agrees.
So
I wrote
what
that.
do you-
No, I'm just kidding. I didn't.
So moving on. So what do you think makes you effective as a coach, as a director? Because clearly you have a great communication.
Did you tell him who said that?
Carrie Tombasian.
Oh.
Because I was just I was
I
going to
read
ask
that-
him, do you know who would say
Yeah,
something like
well,
that about you?
you're one of the coaches she recommends, and I read that, that she had on her site about you, and and it really was in line with things, that I've heard from my agent, Peter Verano, and from people that you just really are able to cut through to the heart of the performance.
I cut through because, number one, I'm honest. And because I do that because I feel it's fair. And I think that actors need to know where they are. Now, I always preface it by saying, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
I think my opinion has some weight because I'm out there. I'm just in the field. I've been in it for a long time. I'm in the business. I'm still active. Fortunately, knock on wood, I'm still active in the business, still relevant. So therefore, I think I have a point of view that has some importance and some knowledge behind it. So I think it carries weight. But that being said, there is a certain subjectivity to the business as well. But I think just by hearing people speak and having them in the booth and directing them for about an hour when I first meet them, I can pretty much judge where they are at this point, what they need to do to go to the next level, or in certain circumstances to reevaluate their goal.
Yeah.
Because I always say, an actor friend of mine said this to me recently, and it resonated to me, that when actors would go to him and say, how do you get voiceover? He always prefaces it by saying, there's a pretty high cover charge getting into voiceover. And it really is true, because the amount of money you spend on classes, and there's no guarantee every step of the way that this step is going to get you to the next step, and then getting the demo reels and all that. And as Chuck knows, I mean, there are a lot of people that want to do demo reels out there. Yeah. And I'm sure you get a lot of people that, they just are not ready. And, and that's tough.
I won't,
absolutely.
No. I won't do a demo for anybody who's not ready.
Absolutely. And so when people come to me for coaching and I listen to them, I always sit down with them and I give them a state of the union sort of thing. And I really try to preface it again by, I try to be nice and delicate about it, but I'm also very honest with them. And I go, you take this information and do whatever you want to with this information. You can tell me to go screw myself and go train with someone else. And I hope you succeed.
Right.
But I'm here to tell you, based on your performance right now and what's going on trend-wise in the business, you have quite a journey ahead of you. Now, I always deal with expectations as well. For example, if someone comes to me, and this has happened, where they sound like they're in their mid-60s, they've never acted a day in their lives, but they're retired. And so I sit down with them and I go, listen, here's the deal. There are not a lot of people that sound like they're in their 60s that are working, and if there are people, those are people that have been doing this since they were 20 or 30. That being said, if your expectation is such that this is a hobby, that you're just happy taking classes and exercising another part of your being, which is a voice and being creative that way, and don't expect to make another penny, then that's great. Go for it. I'm glad to work with you. Let's have fun. Let's play, and I'll try my best to really get the reads up, and who knows, maybe you will make some money on this, but I want you to be aware of the realities. Then you can judge as to what you want to do with this information, whether you want to take it to the next step, or you might say, you know what, it sounds a little dicey to me. I was hoping I could retire but still make some money. And then, I really have them sit down and ask themselves some hard questions. I mean, the acting business, listen, there are no guarantees ever. There's no guarantee in any business, really. But in terms of the acting business, on camera, theatrical, stage work. There are no guarantees that any of you guys or anyone's going to work ever again. You can be fantastic and never work again. So I really try to be realistic. So in that answering your question, part of that what did she say? Diagnostician. Can't even say the word.
Not to be confused with a dietitian.
That'd be
right,
take
exactly.
Take two,
I know.
Jeff. Try that again. Yeah. I'm going to direct you now.
Yeah, I know.
Try that.
Don't ask me.
You're so pretty.
The outtake reel.
Wait a minute, that sounded real. You got the job.
Thank you.
That was so natural.
But but I really try to not only go into that area, but I also sit down and give them concrete advice about this is what I identify based on our experience together of maybe possible blocks, whether it's acting, you need to go take an acting class, a regular acting class, or improv, because you need to loosen up a little bit and expand, you're a little too controlled. Or you may need to go take some reading classes or go home and do some reading exercises. I also send people to speech therapists because I get a lot of people with some speech problems, and I'm very honest with them. I go, okay, there's a definite wet S there, you've got to take care of it. Or, you know, you really have, there's something going on in your throat that I'm hearing, you might want to go get that checked out because you can hear these things after a while. So that may be what Carrie was talking about.
Well, and also I think being informed about the different genre of voiceover because, you know, some, you know, maybe if it's not promos for you, maybe there's audio, you know, so there's just all, there's all different kinds. But I think when you fixate on this is what I have to do, making sure that you can really actually be competitive in it.
Absolutely. Well, you know, to that point, I had a gentleman come in to me and he wanted to do commercial, and after reading him for about a half hour, I said, okay, you're a promo guy. So I said, I don't do this very often, but I'm switching our session right now. I'm giving you promo copy. And he was amazing. It was a natural for him. So, and he hadn't even thought that was an option. There have been times
where... Was his name Don LaFontaine?
It was. He's one of my success stories. Not totally kidding. Totally kidding. But I worked with Don many times.
Yeah, he taught Don.
Yeah. He made him who he is.
True or false? Great audio isn't cheap, and cheap audio isn't great.
True.
I read that.
Yes.
You say that. Can you give us a little bit of what you mean by that?
With the technology being so accessible now, that it has created a situation where doing what we do doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't cost a lot of money to have the basic setup in a garage where you have the Mac and the, you know, you have a basic editing, what is GarageBand or whatever, you know. You can have those systems set up and a microphone, and you can bring someone in and record them and put some sort of needle drop underneath it and edit it and call it a day, and it's a radio spot. However, there's a whole other side of production that I think people don't value, which is experience and knowing what works and what doesn't work, and just having a sense of your audience and what they'll respond to, and an instinct about it. And I think that you can't pay for. That just comes with working in that environment with all these wonderful, incredible people, and kind of filing all these things that have worked and not worked away, and you bring them out at different times. It's like the other day when CBS called me and they had this spot, and they were in a real bind because there was a laughing llama in the spot. Well, when they described to me, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I knew exactly whom I wanted to hire to do the llama, and I knew exactly how the spot was going to be designed. And we were able to turn that around in 24 hours. And I was pretty proud of that spot. And I don't think that someone operating out of their garage would be able to do something like that because they don't have the resources available that we have and the knowledge that we have. And that mountain, that incredible amount of years and years and years of working with ad agencies, working with networks, working with fantastic talent, and having our ability to do outreach very quickly. And I have great relationships, thankfully, with all the agents, most of them, and other casting people. And so if I get into a bind, I need something very specific, I can pick up the phone and call an agent in New York or Chicago or London, and I can find a very unique, specific talent in a very quick amount of time. And I think that again is based on relationships that I've worked on for many years and just experience in the business. So to answer your question, I think good audio requires a lot more than just having the machine.
That's good. I like that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the casting process. Let's say for a typical radio project, on average, how many auditions would you get?
Well, you know, if our sister company, Lane Craig Casting, if they were doing the casting, then they typically, for let's say if it's a monologue, one voice, then we might hear 30 or 35 people, and we'll be able to, you know, get it unless something changes during the casting process. But that's because, you know, casting companies are known and valued for being very specific, and they'll call everyone and bring 2 from this shop, 2 from this shop, 2 from this shop, and they really collect the, not necessarily the cream of the crop, because a lot of people could do it, but they make sure we're covered.
Right.
We get coverage in terms of different types and all that. But if we deal directly with talent agencies, then obviously we'll get substantially more. And even though I could put out the call and have it limited, it'll still be a substantially larger amount of people to listen to.
Like, for example?
Maybe 50 to 75.
Okay.
You know.
And it's always, you know, with the demo, it's how many seconds will the agent listen? You know, with an audition, do you listen to the whole thing? Do you listen to all of them? Is it that sweet spot of 5 seconds? I mean, is it just the slate? That and we're putting you on the spot, but I know that it's not an absolute. But there's always that, gosh, am I even getting heard?
Well, you know, I can only speak for myself.
Of course.
But I feel...
Well, if you take out your little crystal ball down there, you could probably speak for everybody else, too.
But you're the only one that's right.
You're
the only one that's right, Jeff.
Yes,
so,
and I like that attitude. You're
the
actually
other people,
right.
it's like,
you're
wah,
right.
wah, wah, you know, Charlie Brown's teacher, but you're the voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I listen to every single audition, but I don't listen to all of it. For example, I have in my mind what I think will work already.
Right.
But that's not to say that I'm not open to something different.
Right.
But also, it could also depend on how complicated the spot is. And if there's a turn in the spot, far into the spot, I'll listen to the whole thing. But for the most part, I can listen to maybe 15 seconds of an audition, and I can tell whether the actor's really connecting with it or not. And again, that's based on whether or not how the spot is constructed. If it's a very simple monologue, then yes, probably 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds into it, I'll know, and I'll zap ahead. And I'll do that, and I'll usually jot down the ones that I respond to right away, just a knee-jerk reaction, you know, something in the voice that I liked. Then I will go back through and I'll listen, of those people, I'll listen to the entire audition, and then that's when I start tossing them out, one, or this one's better, this one, or I'll narrow it down, and then I'll have someone else come in and listen to my choices, and collectively we'll make a decision. But I do listen to all of them, but I may not listen to the entire audition, because based on the first 15 seconds, 20 seconds of that particular read, I could probably tell you whether or not they have a chance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I always tell people this. When you go to, say, a karaoke bar, right, and somebody gets on the mic to sing, 3 seconds into it, you know whether this is going to be a good experience or it's going to be like,
a tomato
I need to go to the bathroom right now.
Right, yeah.
Right? So, and it's the same thing. Your ears are so trained that right away you know, okay, this guy's got it, they're connecting, blah, 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 da, da, da. Yeah, I want to listen to the whole thing later.
Right.
When I'm deciding. Very good.
Yeah.
That's true.
So that's the way I do it.
So the beginning of those auditions need to be really good.
Yeah.
Make sure you're connecting at the very beginning.
In the very beginning. If you start connecting towards the end, nobody's going to hear you.
Your best material shouldn't be at the end.
Right.
Yes.
But as I said, I will listen to the whole thing if, let's say, there is some interesting turn at the end that I really want to make sure that the actors are getting, and then I'll do that. So it really just depends on the spot, too.
Cool.
Cool.
Good. Thank you. It kind of, you know, because for a lot of people, it's that whole, it's just a mystery, you know.
It is.
And it's a very
well, I mean,
curious
the more
thing.
you know, man, the better, the faster you can get there, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
my best advice for everyone is to don't feel like that the reason why you didn't book something is based on your talent, because so many other things can happen. And I say at least 50% of the time the spot got killed.
Yeah.
Then another 20% they changed from a male to a female.
Oh, I know. I love that. When I see something that I read on or I was on a veil for, and then I go, oh, I can't be a dude.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
What's for dinner? You got to move on. I mean, you can't control that. You could do your best work, leave it in the booth, and go home and go on with your day.
Absolutely. There have been too many times, I can tell you, that I've been in the middle of holding an audition, and in the middle of the audition, the ad agency calls or the network calls, and they've changed their minds and they've changed the type in the middle of the audition.
Awesome.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I still continue. If I can't get that different read from that actor, I still read them just in case, because there's a chance they could go back. It's not a
Right,
complete waste
right.
of time.
Right.
But that just shows you how volatile and crazy and last minute this business can be.
Yeah.
So,
We're going to put you on the spot a little bit more here.
okay.
So you sit down and you're listening to 75 auditions.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
You condense those down to maybe, let's say, 20.
Okay.
That you feel, you know what, these are really good proposals. I loved them right off the bat. There was something there. So you're listening to those 20. What is it that helps you decide who books the job? What are the elements that you're looking for?
Well, sometimes that's really hard because you're sitting there listening to 20 people and they're all wonderful.
Yeah, I know.
And it's very tough. And I'll tell you, all of a sudden it starts coming down to, sometimes it's just a little something in the delivery, something in the voice, some quality about their voice. Because, you know, when they get down, when you're dealing with LA, New York, all the wonderful professional voiceover talent, they're all so incredibly talented and gifted, and they're all bringing a somewhat unique quality or something to their reads. So then you're sitting there with an embarrassment of riches. You know, you've got 20 wonderful people that each one of them would probably be fantastic. And you're going, gosh, how am I going to narrow this down? Well, sometimes it could be as simple as I start thinking about, from the production point of view, which voice is going to cut through best based on what's going on in the spot itself. If I see that the spot has a very active rock track or something like that, and there's someone in that, one person in that 20 that has a little bit of a thinner, weaker voice, that might eliminate that person. They may have had a wonderful ability to interpret the copy, but from a production perspective, you know, we could probably make that work, but there may be another voice that's a bit more resonant that will cut through, knowing that there's going to be a lot going on in that spot. And so when I'm constructing the spot, I won't have to worry about the engineer having to EQ and force that voice more in front. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I'll start thinking in terms of, when I start narrowing down, that is a factor I will take into consideration. Is that, you know, whether or not they'll cut through with the production. Another one is that sometimes I have to think about, okay, this spot is for a certain ad agency, and these people are known to make last-minute changes. So knowing that, of the 20 actors, which one is the most flexible? That in the event that something happens and it's a substantial change, I don't want a one-hit wonder.
Right.
I want someone who has a wider range. So that may weigh into my decision-making process, who has more flexibility to roll with it. Because as you know, from being in the booth, oftentimes you're not quite dead on like your audition. You know, by the time they get the read that they buy and you listen to your audition, you're like, wow, it's a little different. I'm glad I pulled that one off. Because you don't know what happened in between the time that you auditioned and it got approved and then you came into the studio to record. That can be a matter of 4 hours, or it can be 4 weeks. A lot can happen. There are a lot of people
A lot of opinions.
Absolutely. And so things can change. Then sometimes if I think that the spot, it's going to be a volatile room or volatile environment, I'll look at that list of 20. I'll say, who have I worked with before? All things being equal, who do I think might roll with the punches emotionally a little bit more?
Interesting.
And so I'll factor. So those are all things that I have to take into consideration from a producer's perspective and a director's perspective, because I don't want to corner myself into a situation where I have an ad agency sitting behind me, I'm directing and running the session, and I have an actor having a meltdown. So I want to try to eliminate that possibility as well. Not that that happens very often, rarely.
Of course.
But you know what I mean. I have to take all that into consideration.
Absolutely.
So that might affect my decision-making process as well.
Who has the final word as to A, who books the job, or B, that the read that you've directed is the one that we want? Who has the final say into that? Yeah, that's what we're going to go with. Is it you or is it the client?
Commercially, rarely do we have that final say. It used to be we had more of that, but now there's such a committee going on that we're so far removed from that, you know, it goes and then we just get calls back. They will sometimes ask us, whom from this list do you suggest? Who have you worked with before? What do you guys think? And we'll sometimes send suggestions. We'll say we like A, B, C, and then they'll choose. Sometimes they choose, or they'll just go opposite of that. They ask us, but they don't listen. With promo, we have more decision-making process.
Yes.
We're more keyed into that because we'll sometimes keep it very limited, and then we'll make our recommendation and we'll build a spec spot around the one we're recommending. And so with that in mind, oftentimes that person ends up getting it. If the voice hasn't already been chosen and we're just getting the radio portion, the on-air portion, you know, we may have already just inherited the spot, so therefore we don't have a casting choice at all. They've already chosen the person. But when we can choose, we more often than not have more of the ability to make that final selection.
That's good.
Is there a hierarchy that the radio, like, you know, the chicken or the egg, does the radio come first or the TV come first, or it just depends if it's a...
It just depends, but I think, you know, from my perspective, oftentimes we're working with people who have already been campaigned on various, like they'll be the voice of the network.
Right.
So, you know, that question doesn't, you know, it's just TV, radio is going hand in hand.
So Jeff, if people want to get in touch with you about coaching privately or how to get information on your upcoming workshops, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Email.
Email.
Yes.
And what would that be?
It's the initial J, and it's my last name, which is Howell, Howell, at Wadio, and that's radio with a W, so it's wadio.com.
Cool.
Beautiful.
That's the best way to reach me.
Well, I got to say something. I mean, from all the stuff that we've talked about, this has been a really major gold nugget full episode here with you. So thank you very much for sharing and for being so open about the whole process and everything. I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there going like, you know, watching this thing like 80 times to not miss anything. But if I had just sat down and watched this episode with you, man, I'd be emailing you right now, and I'd be like, where can I meet this guy? Where can I take his, you know, some of his workshops and stuff like that? Because you really, really have a very unique pulse and perspective on the whole business and how it works. So kudos to you, dude.
Yeah,
really,
well,
really
my
cool.
pleasure. I enjoy,
absolutely.
I obviously enjoy talking about it. So. It's a great
Thank
business.
you.
Thank you
I
so
really
much.
appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You know, we know that you're super busy, so we have to let Jeff go. But thank you for coming on here and sharing with us, man. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Jeff.
My
All right,
pleasure.
buddy. Take care, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Jeff Howell, ladies and gentlemen. Over and out.
Hey, this is Jeff Howell, and I just got buzzed by Chuck and Stacy. Hope you guys had a great time. I really enjoyed talking about the voiceover business, and I hope you guys got a lot out of it. A lot of good stuff and a lot of great information, and I hope it comes in handy. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Wow. Now, I know you guys got so much cool information today that you can't wait to next week because we're going to have another great episode of VO Buzz Weekly.
Absolutely. Keep up with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, you guys, at VO Buzz Weekly. Take care till we see you next time, and just remember, you always have time for a little buzz.